We're talking about comic book coloring today, people, okay? It's probably the discipline that I'm the least experienced with, but I feel like with just the last comic book that I worked on and just doing research, I've sort of gotten to the point where I feel like I have some sort of a process. I have a way of doing things in which I feel good about it, okay? I'm gonna share that with you. Full, unredacted process. I'm gonna give you what I got, okay? I guess one of the first major things that I do when I'm coloring is that instead of working on one page, going to the next one, working on one page, I will color 4 to 6 pages at a time because I kind of want to have coloring shifts throughout the comic. I just came across this in a recent comic I've been picking up. It's called Viking Moon. There was a sequence where it was like 4 pages in a forest and then 4 pages on a ship, back to back, and it gives the reader the idea that they're making progress in the book. How you don't want to really have your comic be one dead set color the entire time because like the reader isn't really going to feel like they're making progress, if that makes any sense. If you design your comic in a way where there's 4 to 6 scenes and those 4 to 6 scenes have a different aura, a different vibe in each one, the reader's going to feel like they went through the story. So there's multiple strategies to color. The way that I found that works for me is having a character layer, a background layer, and an object layer, and then having like if I need it, I have an overlay layer of like effects, lighting effects, glow, stuff like that. What this allows me to do is make clip layers on top of that. And it's sort of just that freedom because when you have a clip layer of a character or an object, then you're able to really play around with that. You don't have to worry about re-erasing and erasing. You kind of just make the color flats and you use those shapes and you just have to do that once. And then you just paint within that shape. With coloring too, you can really play with the depth of field in a panel, in a scene. If you want to drop out the opacity of something in the distance, that is a big help to create that further foreground, middle ground, and background. Either dropping the opacity or if it's a night scene and there's sort of just a navy blue localized color, you drop that black line in the background to sort of a navy blue or maybe a darker gray or something like that. Okay, so just as an aside, I'm gonna have a couple examples of coloring, things that I like, some artists that I just have recently found and I'm sort of excited about their work and I just wanna share that with you. So I recently came across Tula Lotte. I had this comic cover that she did saved on my Pinterest board, and then that kind of just sent me down the rabbit hole of who is this artist, what has she done, what else has she worked on. She sort of has like a thin gestural painterly line work mark making that is very traditional looking, and she sort of has a similar process to me where it's like you do a little bit traditional, you do a little bit digital. You try to make the digital look as traditional as you can. Her work on the Barnstormers is really solid. It's really cool looking. That's sort of like the digital coloring that I really like. If you're curious about Tula Lotte, that's her pen name. Her real name is Lisa Wood, I believe. She's a badass. You should definitely check her out. Another example is a comic called Pulp by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. There's sequences in that where it's sort of dreamlike and it's sort of flashback and the colors are almost like they're splatted on the canvas. The big idea about coloring, for me at least, is choosing what you want to be the star of the show. If you have a color first or color priority over your line work, or if you have a line work and heavy black ink priority, those are the things that you want to think about. Those are the things that you're gonna wanna juggle with and either paint with colors or just, if you have more of a line work heavy or like intricate inking, I'm thinking of an artist like Joelle Jones, for instance. She sort of is able to still have her inks ring through with more simplified colors. So the colors sort of take a back seat and the inks are the star of the show. Another example would be Fiona Staples in Saga. We all know Saga. It's one of the classics. It's super popular. The coloring is definitely the star of the show, at least in my opinion. The line work is loose and sort of the painterly aspects of the coloring come through. And then if we were to look at The Wintermen, Dave Stewart did the colors on that, and what I really like about certain sequences in that comic is how in certain scenes there's sort of a localized monochromatic decision for the coloring. Whether if they're in a bar or it's a night sequence in an alleyway, you only really get one range of it's very monochromatic. let's get back to work. So what I'll do once I have those color flats, then I'm able to choose, do I want to add texture, a multiply layer on top of it? Because sometimes if you paint things like the grass is green and the sky is blue, you can add a multiply layer and create sort of more of a dramatic scene, for example. And that's kind of a good way to treat coloring, I feel like, is more so to play around. Because you can sort of choose, you can do your color flats as the general color of a character or the general color of a building, but then with a clip layer, then you can get down to the nitty-gritty of what you want that color to actually be. I mean, it's almost like there's tiers to coloring. You can choose how intense you want your colors to be, how much presence you want them to have. I sort of lean more towards the color flatting. Like if I were to make a tier list, not a tier list of better or worse, but a tier list of intensity, it probably is like color flats are the easiest. That's something like Hellboy or Wintermen. And then you have like rendered colors. I'm gonna milk the popularity of Absolute Batman because I'm reading it right now, I'm really liking it, and the colors are very strong. It's a step above flats because they are not fully rendered, but painted. You can kind of see the form of musculature or an environment, a building, without it taking too far away from Nick Dragata's inks and just like the drawing, you know what I mean? And then we have a case of somebody like Tula Lote who has fully painted, creating an aura, creating a whole different sense of color, you know? So like those are the three tiers, and I kind of think at least I float more around like the flat to almost a little bit rendered. And I'm not really saying that one is better than the other. That's not a tier list of this is the best, this is the worst. Whatever's gonna work more in your comic or whatever is going to work more in your scene, in your sequence. There's a case for every style, and there's a case for black and white, there's a case for gray, there's a case for fully rendered comics. So the colors that I'm using on page 4 and 5, I'm able to apply to pages 6 and 7. Pages 1 through 3 are sort of like a flashback sequence in a backyard, and I want them to have a different sort of feel than the jump to the next scene, you know, where we're in present time, we're in sort of like this industrial, sort of just depressing vibe, you know, and if you want to get more of a vibe of a scene in your comic, pick your favorite movie or look at reference material, because lighting is super different in weather too, you know? So like if you want to capture sort of a gloomy, dark and stormy, good drink by the way, sky, you know, on a dock and like get a nautical vibe, you're going to be pretty limited for colors. It's going to be a lot of grays, a lot of blues. But that's kind of how I found the colors that I wanted to use, at least for these scenes. I knew I wanted the navy blue sort of reflections on the windows, and I wanted that red, earthy, dark brick for the buildings, but also kind of gray and depressing, in contrast to the bright orangey tones of the flashback sequence. Coloring is not really that complex. There's some people that say that coloring doesn't matter. They are people who are more line work and drawing forward, because at the end of the day, you don't want your colors to take away from the focal point of whatever the focal point is in the panel or the splash page. Hopefully you got something from this, guys. Happy holidays, safe travels to whoever is traveling. Peace out. See you guys later. Bye.